Katherine.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I rise to put on the record this evening a contribution of condolence for Ian McBean, AM. And this is a contribution from his daughter Kathy from the service that was held back in February. So Kathy's contribution was as follows. Dad's journey began with humble beginnings, arriving in the Territory with nothing more than a swag, a saddle and a racing pad. He started out near Alice Springs on El Kedra Station in 1953. He was 22 years old. His early days were spent as a horse tailor and then drover, traversing some of the roughest country in Australia through Queensland, Quilpie, Camberwell, the Barkly and VRD regions in the Northern Territory. During this time, Dad met and married Myrtle, my mum, who accompanied him on many of those droving trips on the road for months, at a time with a mob of sometimes up to 1,500 head. His dedication and resilience in these earlier years really laid the foundation for what would become an amazing career that spanned over 6 decades in the bush. In 1964, Dad's life took a significant turn when he drew first in the ballot for the 1,500 square mile Innisfail station. With determination, he transformed this undeveloped property into a thriving cattle station. At Innisfail, Dad first settled on the banks of the Victoria River Downs from the current Victoria River Bridge. Home consisted of a tent and cane grass bough shed, kitchen, and the kids, Eddie and Margie, slept in the rusty old caravan. However, it was an Aboriginal stockman, one of the local elders, who soon pointed out that the site he had planned to settle and to build a home on would flood regularly. As a result, they moved lock, stock and barrel to the new station site in 1967, which is where the station homestead is now situated. Of course, there was nothing there and they had to start from scratch. The first home here was a shed that Dad built with dirt floors, 4 walls and a roof. Eventually, Dad employed a builder, Neville O'Farrell, to build our first real home, and during this time, Doug, Craig and I were born. Around this time, Wendy and Stan also came to work for Dad and stayed on as governess and mechanic, and we'll hear a tribute from Wendy later. Steve Hoare also started as a head stockman during Dad's time at Innisfail, and we will also hear from him. After 16 years at Innisfail, Dad acquired Bradshaw Station, one of the largest in the Northern Territory at the time. His tenure at Bradshaw further cemented his reputation in the industry, and through hard work and determination, Dad thrived. And those years built the foundation of a remarkable career. And I'll get the member for Breitling, Mr Deputy Speaker, to read out Sam's contribution, one of the younger sons. Beyond these early ventures, Dad was a stalwart advocate for the cattle industry, which a number of people will touch on today. But beyond these accolades, Dad loved horses. He wasn't just a cattleman. He was a horseman in the truest sense. He understood them, respected them, valued them, and had a bond with a special few. He kept meticulous records of all his horses, including their breeding, who broke them in, or where they had come from. And it was interesting to hear the tales of that on the day, Mr Deputy Speaker. While mustering, he knew a good horse could save your life. He also knew when mustering, we were one of the crew and likely to be yelled at just as much as anyone. If we were in the wrong place at the wrong time, look out. Like any good cattleman, Dad couldn't stand seeing cattle get away. Everyone knew that when he was up in the helicopter with the shotgun, you'd better watch out and stay clear if someone broke away from the mob. Because if you were in pursuit, some of those pellets might just come a little too close, or so my brothers tell me. He helped all of us learn how to ride, from dressage to gymkhanas, camp drafts and some on to rodeos. We would pack up the big red truck and head to Katherine's show, Timber Creek, races or the Costello Yards. Gymkhana. We would camp at the grounds with the horses and sleep in the back of the truck. He loved his community and was a life member of Katherine's show, Douglas Daly Association and Timber Creek Races Committee. Dad was meticulous in all that he did, and nowhere was this more evident than in the diaries he kept throughout his whole life. Every day he recorded the events of his world, weather patterns, rainfall, cattle movements, station business, personal reflections, even down to the phone calls he made each day. One of the things you'll hear about Dad is that he treated everyone equally, and this included the young men who worked for him, who often arrived from tough backgrounds looking for a purpose. He became an authoritative figure in their lives, who set the bar high on what he expected from them, and many went on to become great men running their own properties or just succeeding in life. He set the example and they all tried to keep up. I've heard of many 4 a.m. starts that may have been a little too early, with everyone sitting around waiting for daylight before they could start the muster. Dad couldn't sleep, so everyone else needed to be up. Coming from humble beginnings, Dad was always very unassuming and modest, never flashy. He worked hard, saved and got ahead. He reused what he could, and God forbid if he used too much tie wire when fencing. He also used old World War II blitzers as pickup trucks when bull catching, way into the 80s and early 90s. They were hot, had very little flooring and had no windows, but they were tough like him and just kept on going. One of Dad's defining traits was his loyalty. When he could, he repaid those who had helped him out, never forgetting a favour, especially those who helped us out in those early days when we didn't have much. Dad looked after those who looked after him, and I know when he managed to make a quid, he sought some old mates out to repay the favour. Dad had many friends who have been part of his life for many years, including Cooey and Jeff Hill, who knew Dad from Camberwell, Jim Long from his days at school in Sydney, and Bob Gartrey, who has now passed away, but worked on Gurley and Avon Downs Station with Dad. Dad kept in touch with them all throughout the years. In closing, Kathy's reflections on her dad's legacy is his children and his grandchildren. He loved to hear what we were all up to, and we are all so proud of what he achieved. However, I must tribute the success of our blended family to the 2 great ladies Dad married. Although he thought it was by his design and doing, it was because of them that we remain one connected family. Dad, you set a great example of how to live a great life, and we hope we can all live up to this. And I'll just continue on with Sam, seeing as I've got time. Dad lived a full and remarkable life. Most of my memories with Dad involve what most would call work, but to him was just a way of life. We moved from Innisfail to Bradshaw in '84. My first memories are from Bradshaw. I was about 6 years old and recall being woken up at 4 a.m, getting in the Toyota and heading to Wambungie. For those of you who don't know, Wambungie was about a 15-gate drive away. Every 10 minutes for the next 2 hours, Dad would lean over, wake me up with the words, "Mate, can you get out for the gate?" I'm still unsure if he was wanting to spend time with his son or just needed to get there in a hurry. Dad was passionate about his properties and animals, particularly horses and cattle. He was a great father, however, I would say different to most. Growing up as a kid, I was very privileged to live where we did and learn all aspects of the life that he loved so much. I'm sure that many who have worked for Dad, and many here today, would agree Dad was a great mentor and a great teacher. There were, however, a few prerequisites to get into his class. You had to give 110% all of the time, and you needed to learn fast every time. If you didn't do these, it was unlikely you would pass. I believe Dad's happiest place was in the stock camp at Bradshaw, sitting under a coolabah tree, a mob of coaches pulled up at the dinner camp, having a cup of tea and a corned beef sandwich with a bunch of ringers that all respected him so much. In '96, Mum and Dad decided it was time to slow down, semi-retire, I guess, selling Bradshaw and moving to Benalbo in the Douglas Daily. Dad was 65 and he thought the time was right to slow down. Now let's be clear, slowing down for Dad meant changing from working 15 hours a day, 7 days a week, to 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. Looking back at Dad's life, he was always a thinker, a pioneer of sorts, and even in his so-called retirement, he was developing and clearing properties, trialling new improved pastures and fattening his beloved cattle. Family is what made Dad proudest, and he was a staunch advocate for education and, despite the tough times early on, always prioritised it for all his kids. Dad tried to keep up to date with his grandkids' whereabouts and paths they were taking, always proud and therefore support if anyone needed anything. Dad was lucky to have had 2 wonderful women in his life. Kay, my mother, has been Dad's greatest supporter for the last 50 years, and I'm sure many here have heard the emergency calls over the radio. "Do you read Kay? Do you read Kay? Do you read Kay?" said with such urgency as if there had been an accident. Mum would rush to the radio only to find out Dad was just letting her know he was coming home for smoko. Thank you, Mum, for being by Dad's side all these years, but in particular the last few. He often said how much he loved you and he would be buggered without you. I think if we asked Dad today what were some of his proudest achievements, they would include being a part of the initial group of producers to start the Northern Territory Cattlemen's Association. He was very proud of the NTCA and all it stands for. He was an active member until very recently, attending branch meetings, voicing his concerns and encouraging people like myself to be a part of the organisation. He often said, if you want to influence policy affecting our industry and livelihoods, you need a strong advocacy group, and it's no good sitting outside whinging about it. Get involved and try and fix the problem. Receiving a life membership to the NTCA in 2008 was treasured by Dad. I believe there is no one who has been more passionate about the Northern Territory cattle industry than Ian. Receiving an AM in 2012 was also recognition of 60 years of dedication to the industry. As one of Ian's sons, there's many things I admire in Dad. However, I believe his greatest trait came to him very naturally. Dad gave everyone a go. He was very fair and treated everyone equally. It didn't matter if you were black or white. It didn't matter if you were well off or not. It didn't matter if you had an education. Dad could talk to the Prime Minister in a fancy office in Canberra or a ringer under a tree holding a mob of cattle. He would give all the people the same respect. He could talk as long as he could talk cattle or cricket. Equally, if either man did not agree with Dad, he was happy to tell them they were full of shit. Well, old fella, the time has come to say goodbye. You lived a great life, you have inspired many, and the legacy you will live on. Rest easy, but for Christ's sake, keep the bloody lead steady. Thank you for giving me the extra time, Mr Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Member for Katherine. Okay.